Hey buddy, what's going on, man? It's been a minute. How are things on your side? Life's good? Family's good? Nice. Yeah, about the same on this end. You know how it goes. I mean, we can complain, but it's probably not worth the effort. Yeah, so spent the weekend doing some stuff with the family, but I did get out to a movie. Went and saw that new Alien Romulus, which was all right. I don't know if it was as bad as I think it is, or as good as they're saying it is. But it did get me thinking about some elements of the Aliens franchise, and then also I back to back the next night I ended up just sitting and watching Alien from 1979, like the original one, and it was kind of weird watching those back to back and seeing how much of this is paralleled and how much the new movie just feels like sort of a rehash of all the ideas that have come before it, and it just kind of played as a greatest hits, I guess is what I would say. Um, it had a good start. Like I like the setup and the story. It felt new and different in terms of what it was coming at you with. It spent a little bit more time sort of building out the world, kind of getting you introduced to some characters, that sort of thing. And it felt a little more grounded in the sense that it was trying to give you something to latch onto, the everyday aspect of it, which I think the first Alien does a really good job of, right? When you look at when the guys get out of the cryo tubes or whatever you call them, the berths, I guess is probably the correct term, where they were sleeping. Essentially, it spends a lot of time setting them up in the original movie as they are working people, right, on a ship, and they just, this is kind of a slice of life. How's their day look? What kind of stuff they have to do? It's, I guess, a bit unusual in the fact that they're being woken up to do something that was outside of their thing, but from their perspective, they're just guys there doing it, guys and gals there doing a job, and that's just the way it is. And this movie, sort of, the new movie Romulus, starts sort of the same way, giving you an idea of what it would be like to work in one of these space colony slash mining colonies, and sort of sets up Weyland Yutani as a company that is sort of, they, I don't know if I'd call it the antagonist of the, it's not of the film, but just overall it's an antagonist inside the universe, right? It's got a presence that exists in all the movies. So, not too bad starting. And then I think as the movie progressed, it just slowly became more of a greatest hits of other movies that came before it, right? So it, to me, it felt like a rehash of a bunch of stuff from previous movies where you've got people climbing around in air ducts, you've got, an elevator. I don't want to get into spoilers, but it had a good start. It felt good. It's just that as the movie progressed, it felt like it was trying to hit all these beats that had been done in other movies so that it could sort of call back to nostalgia of, hey, don't you remember that part? Oh, do you remember that part? All these different things that happened in Aliens, Alien Resurrection. I didn't see so much of a reference to Alien 3 now. I haven't seen that movie in a few years, so it's hard to remember how that movie played, but that movie feels like such an anomaly inside of the overall franchise, just being sort of it's more of a David Fincher movie than it is an Alien movie, which it shows. But either way, the movie sort of progressed into this space where it had some cool ideas. I don't want to spoil anything because it's a new movie and maybe you'll go see it, maybe you won't. I don't know, man. I don't know if you're into that kind of movie these days, but overall, it sort of lost me as it progressed on, which is a shame because it looks great. The movie actually, for an $80 million, I think it was $80 million budget or whatever, looked very nice. It really captured that same aesthetic as the original Alien, kind of gave you that retro future, I guess is what people call it, look with the CRT screens and all that kind of fun stuff. But it really did nail that aesthetic. It's a good looking film. There's some interesting use of sound design in it, which is cool. When they get into space, there's sections where there's no audio because, in theory, there's no audio in space. You can't hear anything, and sound can't travel through a vacuum, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a science guy. I don't understand that shit. But anyways, did some kind of interesting stuff. But then there was just so many things that were sort of jarring. And there's one element that I think if you watch the movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're just kind of, it's a WTF moment where you're like, why? What was the reason that you chose to do this? This really does not serve any purpose, and it's just kind of stupid. The movie actually reminds me of the way Rogue One, the old Star Wars, or oh yeah, is it old now? Jeez, it's been a long time, I guess. But that Rogue One movie did the same sort of things where it was, oh, do you remember those guys from the cantina on whatever the desert planet? Oh, do you remember the blue milk? Oh, do you remember? It had a lot of that kind of stuff where you're going, I don't really need nods to that. I'm familiar with the movie, but I don't really need that. It doesn't add anything. And if anything, it just kind of feels sort of like cheap fan service in that sense. But whatever. Maybe I'm the odd one out on that one. The other side of this was just rewatching the original Alien, and there's a lot of things I thought of as I was kind of rewatching that one back to back with this new one, which is one, the pacing. The pacing of the 1979 movie was so much slower than what you would expect in a modern film. Like a modern film just has got opening stingers, got to get you interested right away. Every horror movie this day, oh, we got to have some unrelated character get killed by something so that you can get ready to be scared. Um, but this movie just was very slow, very deliberate in what it was doing, setting up the world, giving you a sense of what the ship looked like, who the people were, how they interacted, what their, I said earlier, a slice of life, how do they work? How does their day look in terms of just doing their job that they're in space to do? And so this really, really slow build up to, when you finally get to the planet, and then things start to kick off and it speeds up, and it feels like a very non-linear, like I guess logarithmic way of the movie's pacing going, where it's very, very slow, slow, slow. It speeds up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and then suddenly, boom, it's in a sprint for the remainder of the film. As soon as the facehugger latches on to, I think the character is Kane, that's when things start to take off. And there's more of a mystery element to what's going to happen, what is this thing? How are they going to stop it? Are they going to be able to stop it? What's going to happen next? Kind of, it does a really good job of that. But I could totally see how modern audiences would have trouble because they're so used to the extreme elements of just, oh God, we got to have action happening right away. We've got to have things happening. We can't slowly build atmosphere and slowly build up the world to give you a sense and to get you situated in it before we throw the scares at you. Because I think that's why that film, in my opinion, is more effective. But also the other kind of weird thing is when I was thinking about the parallels between Alien 1979 and Romulus, is also how every other movie, well, no, I shouldn't say every other movie. I'm just thinking specifically of Aliens, but Aliens does a lot of the same thing that Alien did in terms of the establishing shots of the ships, where they show them panning the camera through and giving you a sense of what the ship looks like inside, that sort of stuff. You've got to have a scene where everybody's eating together so that you can get to know them. It's funny how when you see it in a newer film and that formula is sort of reused, it becomes so much more obvious when you look back at the other two films together and say, oh, okay, this stuff wasn't as obnoxious. I don't know why, but it wasn't obnoxious to me to see that in Aliens. And I don't know if it's because it was subtle in the way it was done or it's just done really well. I don't really understand what it is that didn't feel so obnoxious about that. You've got to have that weird almost fourth act to the movie where you think everything's done and then boom, we got to hit you with something else that sort of amps it up again. And the first movie, I think, was unique in doing that at the time. I don't, honestly, I'm not a film buff in terms of, I've never seen a billion different horror movies over the years, but I'm assuming that was sort of a new idea at the time. And if it wasn't, whatever, you can tell me. I'm sure you know more of these than I do. Um, but of course, Aliens did it and did it even bigger. And then I can't think of Alien 3 didn't do that. It was pretty linear in terms of how its story was told. It again, it feels like a very different film than the rest of the films. And I don't even remember what Alien Resurrection was like, other than the last part of that movie and just being, scratching my head as they're going, what were we thinking when we put this one down on paper? I often wonder that when I watch some of these movies. I don't know about you, but I see somewhere I go, what was going through the writer's head here where they thought this would work? I try to pretend to be a writer myself. I try to write stories. You've probably seen some of the stuff I've written. But at the end of the day, I have to question, what was somebody thinking when they looked at that and said, oh, yeah, yeah, this could totally work. And then you see it on screen and go, nope, that didn't work at all. So, just kind of interesting thoughts in terms of that. I guess I'm rambling a little bit here, but whatever. Welcome to my reality tunnel. That's what I do. Um, and I say a lot. So, you can give me shit for that, but that's just how it is. I'm not a polished public speaker. I'll just get that out of the way right now. So anyways, yeah, Alien Romulus, kind of interesting to see how the two are very alike in terms of what they are doing, but one just feels better. And I don't know, maybe it's nostalgia or I just appreciate older films, but I really did enjoy the slow burn of Alien as it sort of built up the atmosphere and got you situated in the setting where you had an understanding of what was going on, or you sort of were watching these people's lives just sort of play out. And then when things get crazy and shit hits the fan and the alien shows up, it just takes off at a rapid pace from there. It goes into a full-on sprint till the end of the film, and it just feels good in terms of that. But I could totally see how people would just be bored in the first 30 to 40 minutes of the film when they're, undocking from the ship and getting ready to drop into atmosphere and flying in and landing. All of that could feel pretty drawn out. Whereas a new movie like this Romulus one, it's just like, boom, we're gonna take off from the planet and get to this thing, and then we're going to have a docking sequence, but it's quick and snappy, and then we're going to get them in there and moving around. So, whatever. But it had some cool ideas and some of the stuff it did with the facehuggers. I really was happy to see a return to practical effects. I do think that they just look so much better when they do stuff like that. I find CG just kind of wobbly. It's not great, and it doesn't seem to age well. Some things I think work really well in CG where they have static shots or fixed shots of skylines or background plates and things like that. But as soon as you have some sort of a thing that needs to move around on the screen, there's got to be a sense of weight and reality to it that a practical effect that is just touched up with a little bit of CGI really does kind of nail on that. So that was cool. And the director, I think he did the Evil Dead remake, which was, I guess, I don't know. I've watched it a couple of times. It was okay. I don't know what you thought of it, but for me, not too bad. It wasn't some standout. I wasn't sitting here going, man, I can't wait to watch that one again. But I do remember the bit with the bread or the electric bread knife, or no, it was like an electric carving knife, because I swear to God, I had that exact one at that time in my life. When I saw that, I was like, oh shit, I think I have one of those in the drawer, and I did. And so that was pretty gross when she's like going in on her arm with that thing, because after using one of those things to carve a turkey, you're kind of like, oh shit, man, that'd be a wild thing to do. But anyways, yeah, that was just sort of the stuff I had thinking about that. I'm sure I could sit here BSing with you for another hour about it, but just trying to keep it straightforward in terms of the things I thought. Actually, there is one more thing about this that I was kind of wondering as I was watching all of this is, can you make an alien movie without the xenomorph thing, like the alien, so to speak, being the central antagonist? I guess is it considered the antagonist? Whatever, the creature being the thing that's chasing everybody. Does it always have to be that alien, or could you expand on this and have different aliens that maybe the company has found over the years? Like, I don't know, I was thinking, since it was on what do you call it, a space station, maybe they could have had it be a space station that was a research facility for multiple different alien species that they were trying to weaponize, and then having something interacting from that perspective. And I kind of thought of that video game Dead Space, in terms of it sort of built out that kind of an idea where you would go and progressively find weirder and more freakish creatures throughout the space station. And I just wondered, okay, how could you use the Alien formula and setting? Because I think the company Weyland Yutani and the whole aspect of the synthetics who have ulterior motives, or you have company agents like the guy from Aliens, Paul Reiser's character, who are basically kind of screwing everybody else over to get what they want. I think that's a very important part of this whole sort of Aliens franchise, is that, and it's not that it gets downplayed, but I don't know. I mean, I read somewhere that Prometheus didn't do well because people were like, give me the alien. If you're going to make a movie that's an alien movie, I want to see the xenomorph. And so that's what Ridley Scott did with Covenant. And I don't know. I mean, is that the only thing that you want to see when you see one of these movies? I'm more interested in a story that feels fresh and different and new, in the respect that it brings something new to the table. And I guess maybe I'm crazy for thinking in that sense, but it seems like people just want more of the same that they've already seen. And it also had me thinking, so if you can't tell, if you can't call it an alien movie and have some different creature be the antagonist, or whatever we're going to call it in that sense, is there any more stories? Are there any more stories you can really tell in this with that are going to seem fresh and interesting, or is it just going to be a rehash of all the same stuff? And I mean, there's tropes that I mentioned earlier, the scene with everybody eating together, the slow tracking shots inside the spaceship to give you a sense of the locale, the fourth act crap where they do that sort of tacked on action bit at the end. These feel like they've become sort of ingrained tropes inside of the Alien franchise, and so the question is, can they actually make an Alien movie that maybe isn't just so full of the same tropes of its own franchise and is something new and interesting? I mean, I guess it kind of draw parallels to what's going on with the Star Wars franchise, because I think that franchise is basically circling the toilet with, it had this big universe where there's all this opportunity to still tell interesting stories about interesting characters, and you could really widen this thing out. And what do? It's everything's got to have Jedi, everything's got to have bounty hunters. It's never about telling something interesting or focusing on characters, so to speak. It's more about, don't forget there's the Jedi, don't forget there's the Sith, don't forget there's the evil, what do you call it, the Empire, or whatever the stand-in is for the Empire and the new stuff. It's just kind of, it gets tired real quick. And I guess maybe the parallel I would draw would be something like a Conan story. Those old Robert E. Howard stories were interesting for the fact that Conan could be a different, he could fit whatever setting. If you wanted to tell a pirate story, Conan could be in a pirate story. If you wanted to tell a story about thieves and stealing stuff, Conan fit into that story. I think that's how it goes, right? There was I think it's the Elephant Tower of the Elephant is the thief story. There is one that is a pirate story. You'll have to look these up, man. Sorry, I'm not super well versed. I really like Conan, and I've read the stories, and I've listened to them on audiobook too and stuff like that. I really enjoy them. But at the end of the day, the point was the character could fit into sort of any type of story. Like, hell, I'm pretty sure you could have put him in a Western and it would somehow work. And so I kind of wonder about this, where is the Alien franchise just, it has to be these rote items that exist for a film to be called an Alien film, or can you break outside that mold and do something different? But anyways, I'm kind of going down a rat hole here with that. But I don't know what you think, man. Why don't you tell me? Let me know how, if you've seen the movie, what did you think of it? And then on the flip side, how do you think it compares to the other movies in the franchise? Because I'm sure there's a ton of parallels that I'm not even drawing. But this is just what came to my mind as I was thinking about it. What else, man? What else is new? I also took a crack at some body work on the car, totally shifting gears here, going in a different direction, but tried to do a little bit of rust repair. I had a little bit of rust in the back quarter panels. on the around the rear wheels. Of course, I live in a climate where there is a ton of salt in the winter to melt snow, and then gravel, of course. So the two things that make certain that your car will be destroyed over the time that you own it. Luckily, I've been able to live in a place where I've been able to garage the car. I think the car is like 10, 11 years old now. So, I mean, it's getting up there, whatever. And it's not like it was a crazy amount of rust or anything. It was just the paint had chipped away in an area, and I had peeled back some of the stuff, and okay, it's rotted a little bit further. But the net of it is, oh, listen to me sounding like a corporate guy. The net. Um, it it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be getting into it. I've been working on cars a lot in my life. I mean, I've always been turning a wrench, but I never really took on body work. I think I did two small projects. I fixed a door handle once on an old Jeep Cherokee, and it wasn't the sexiest fix, but the door handle wasn't pulling off the door anymore where it was rusted out around. And the other was trying to help a friend do some fixing on an old Honda that was hail damaged. And man, oh man, doing that with him, I remember being like, I am never doing body work again, because the way it turned out was horrendous. We did a terrible job. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know much about repairing. We just thought we could tackle it, and yeah, no, it didn't turn out well at all. You could see every spot we patched because we just did a piss poor job. But back then we didn't have access to YouTube, so we were just sort of going through the automotive store and picking up whatever shit like Bondo and all this stuff. We had no idea what it was or how to use it. We just took a shot at it. But now YouTube has really made it so that this is something kind of anybody can do, which is cool. I like that, and it's given it. This always gives me a good feeling to tackle some project I've never tried before. I mean, I tried plumbing in the house, fixed a bunch of stuff that way. It's not as scary as you think if you just watch a couple of videos and you're not a complete mouth breather. You can sort of think for yourself and go, oh, okay, well, they didn't cover this in the video, but logically, how should I take care of this piece? And obviously, there's some subtleties there that come with experience, but how do you get experience if you don't just give this stuff a try? So I would say, it was a win in terms of me feeling a little more confident about tackling a slightly bigger project next time around Rust, which I will have with an old Jeep that I have as a project. I have an old Jeep Cherokee that I absolutely love, and it's very clean on the body, but there is a bit of rust on a couple of spots, and I've been putting it off because I want to do a good job on it. I want to make sure this thing looks crisp when I do it. So this was a good practice run on that. But the big takeaway here is just, man, give stuff a shot. Like, if you're interested in doing something, if you want to build a shelf or I don't know, whatever, man. There's all sorts of little projects that we can do. I actually built planters last year for the front yard, and I can't remember the guy's name. He was on YouTube, James Pigioni. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. This guy, I think he was in New Jersey. He does these crazy videos on growing stuff in your backyard and building a food garden and all this kind of crap. And he's got a great energy. Like, he's very excited about what he's talking about, and he's very knowledgeable. At least, I mean, he's knowledgeable as far as I can tell. I shouldn't say he is knowledgeable, but he seems very knowledgeable to me based on the information that he was providing. But I took some of his videos, watched a few of his videos as I was trying to learn how to grow some food and make use of my front yard that is otherwise a total waste. I don't understand why we have yards if all we do is grow grass on them. So I thought, okay, shit, let's build something here and grow some food, which sort of worked out, except for the stuff I planted was all stuff I didn't really like. So not a huge fan of spinach, and for some reason I planted 3 types of spinach and then some other leafy stuff. So pro tip, think about what you actually want to grow. But either way, I'm sort of digressing here. What I was kind of getting at was it's fun to try and tackle these projects, and building those planters was, you're cutting some 2x4s and some 2x10s, I think is what I built it out of, and screwing some stuff together. Like, this is stuff that anybody can do. So it's just fun to give it a shot and do a little project like that, because at the end of it, you can look at it and go, man, I tried. Did it fail? Maybe. Did it work out? Awesome if it did. And if it didn't, you learn something from it. So I don't know, whatever. I'm not trying to be a pep talk here, but at the end of it, I'm just saying, like, hey, it's worth, if there's something you're interested in trying, I don't know, what's the investment? Like, I know we've all got jobs, we've all got responsibilities financially. Some of us are doing better than others, But at the end of the day, if you're not spending some of that money to do something that you're interested in doing besides just buying fast food or fucking drugs or alcohol or playing vids or whatever it is, man, we've all got our vices. Spend some of it on doing something productive for yourself. Like, don't worry about the end result. And so what? You screw up, whatever. With the cost of entry for building a planter box, like shit, that guy on the YouTube channel, he had one on how to use old pallets, which you can get for free from most places. There's tons of places. Like I always look on the free section of what is it, Kijiji or whatever, and they always have stuff like that. People just giving away old pallets that you can take, and he showed how you could cut them up and put them together in a way so your cost of entry is next to nothing, and then finding dirt and whatever. Anyways, I'm not a gardening guy. This is just, something I'm kind of going down a rat hole here as well with this, but uh, take on a project, do something, try something this week that you haven't done. It's definitely worth it. Oh man. And the last thing I was thinking about is reading. So I don't know if you're doing much reading these days. I always try to stay up on doing some reading. I think it's important. You got to exercise your mind a little bit. I try to read two different books at the same time. Not obviously not at the same exact time, right? I just try to have two books on the go, one fiction, one nonfiction, and mostly just so that I have something to read at night, which is the fiction book. I've learned this is if I'm going to read something at night before I go to sleep, it needs to be something light and something that is I don't need to think too much or try and remember stuff after, because it's just got to be a fun read as I'm going to sleep. So I was just reading Carl Edward Wagner's Bloodstone, which is a Kane story. It's a sword and sorcery kind of thing. I want to say it was written in the 70s, maybe the 60s. He's an interesting author. He sort of flew under the radar within this sword and sorcery genre, if you want to call it, I don't know if genre a good word for that. Sword and sorcery is more of a style, I guess, but he has a cool character who is this Cain, the mystical swordsman, who may or may not be the Cain from biblical Cain, Cain and Abel, that sort of thing. But he's kind of a Conan-esque character who also is a sorcerer, has the ability to use magic, and he essentially lives forever. So he's seen it all and done it all, and it's sort of interesting. He's more of an anti-hero. The books are a little bit darker in their subject matter. They're not super feel-good books, but they're definitely cool in terms of evoking that dark, gritty world where, I don't know. It's like a darker, more cynical Conan, I guess. I don't know if cynical is even the right word to describe that, but definitely worth checking out. Bloodstone was cool. Very cool sort of idea and setup for a story and for a villain. I really liked the way that the story tied itself up at the end, minus one element that just kind of felt like the writer had backed himself into a corner and just gave himself an out. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking. I think you'll know what I'm talking about with the Bloodstone itself. But if you haven't, check it out. It's definitely cool. It's probably hard to find a physical copy of this one because I think it's out of print. But anyways, very cool stuff. It had really cool art on the front cover, very evocative of that style and that era of those kind of stories. But he really does a good job of writing sort of a Conan-esque. I think he did some pastiche novels as well of Conan, but very fun read, kind of an interesting take on things, and a cool villain and a cool setup and an interesting ending. And then on the flip side, the daytime, what I call like my daytime book, which is the nonfiction book, those are the books that I feel like I need to read when I can have a notebook next to me in case I need to take a note about something I read, or an interesting idea cropped up from it that I need to write down, or something I need to look up or research after the fact. I find trying to read these nonfiction books before I go to bed are terrible because nothing sticks. I go to sleep and then I wake up and I think, what the hell did I read last night? I don't even remember. But I'm just working through one that I've actually read before, which was The Way of Zen. I read it a couple of years ago. It's Alan Watts. Alan Watts is just, I find him very interesting to listen to. I like his lectures that I've got a bunch of those that I've listened to. He's just got a really fun, whimsical way of sort of telling the stories of this stuff. But he wrote a book specifically about the Zen as a, I don't know, I guess he calls it a way of liberation. It's been, like I said, it's been a while since I've read it, so I'm just rereading it to see, and kind of funnily, when I reread books sometimes, I notice that I obviously didn't pay that close of attention the first time I read it, and I think this is a good example of one of those ones that I was reading at night at the time, and it just wasn't sticking. So as I'm going through it now in the daytime when I'm up and I can take some notes and stuff, more ideas are sticking a little bit better for me. But it's definitely helpful. I like Zen and Taoism and things like that a little bit more from a philosophical slash, I guess, a little bit mystical slash spiritual standpoint. They are much better at sort of reminding you that, hey, you don't have to take everything so seriously, and life is meant to be something that, well, okay, is it meant to be? I don't know. That's a broad statement, but I think maybe the way to say it is you can look at it gives you an opportunity to see life in a way where you can take some enjoyment out of it by just enjoying the experience of it, looking at it and going, oh, hey, whatever, this happens, it happens. There's a Zen story that I don't know if it's Zen or Taoist story. It might have been Taoist, but it's the story of a farmer whose horses run off, and the neighbors in the village all come by and they're like, oh, that's awful, your horses have run off, that's a terrible thing to happen, I'm so sorry for you. And the response from the farmer is maybe. And then the next day the horses come back and they bring a whole bunch of wild horses with them, so it increases the size of his stable of horses. And now the neighbors all come by and say, oh wow, this is, what great luck, what amazing things have happened to you, this is incredible. And the farmer says maybe. And then the next day his son is trying to break in one of the horses, and the horse throws him off and breaks his son's leg in the process. And of course the other villagers look at the situation and go, oh my god, it's terrible, it's so awful, what terrible luck. And the guy says maybe. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. The next day, the the recruitment officer for the military comes by, and he's recruiting all the boys of fighting age. And this man's son would have been of fighting age, but with the broken leg, he's exempted from the whole thing. And again, the people in the village, oh wow, what incredible luck here! Your son's safe from going to this awful war and possibly getting killed and all this sort of stuff. And his response is maybe. And I think the point that it's trying to make is that you can see things from any perspective at any time. And that's sort of where I got the idea for this name of the, talking about it, the reality tunnel. That's what it is, really, is how you see it and how you look at it in your own life is how it's going to affect you. I went deep into the Stoicism stuff a number of years ago, and I came out of that thinking, you know what, this just feels like cope. This just feels like you saying like, oh man, life sucks, the world's tough, and I just have to grin and bear it and just take the shit on the chin. And I don't really think that's a way to live your life that feels good. To just constantly be like, oh, well, this shit sucks, but I just got to grin and bear it. That's not really how I want to see my life. I want to have a little bit more laughs, have a few more laughs about it. And so I think that's why Taoism and Zen fit better with my personality, which is much more trying to have a laugh at a bad situation or at a situation. Not that's the thing. Whatever I ascribe to it, good or bad, I think that's the point of that story about the farmer and the horses, is really that it's how you attribute it, your view against it, and saying, okay, is this a bad situation or is this a good situation? And how you view it is what changes how you experience it in a way. So you kind of have to learn to laugh with the situation and trying to, it's really good at learning to laugh at yourself. Geez, man, I laugh at myself constantly for the embarrassing crap that I do and say. And I feel so much better for that than I used to, where I would just beat myself up over it and stuff. So anyways, yeah, man, it's definitely worth checking out if you are into that sort of thing. If you haven't read any Alan Watts, go search him on YouTube. You'll find a whole whack of different videos of people have posted of him doing his lectures. Thank God he recorded a bunch of this stuff, so you could listen to it years later and maybe get some value out of it. And I think he's the first person to tell you he's no major authority on this. It's just a guy who was very interested in it in his youth, and so he studied it and really went deep into it, and he tried to explain how it from his point of view. And it's interesting because he was also contemporary with somebody else who was very impactful to the way I've changed my thinking about the world, which is Robert Anton Wilson. If you haven't heard of him, I think he twisted my mind into a pretzel for a bit there when I was reading his stuff. But he really sort of championed this idea of reality tunnels and that everybody's experiences and how they interpret those experiences is what forms their view of reality. And so your reality and my reality and Bob's reality and Jimmy's reality and Susan's reality, they're all truly different because we all see different things and experience things differently. And so it's not some sort of, reductionist view where you're just like, oh, I guess it's solipsism, whatever that word is basically that you are saying that no reality is real and everything is just moving crap. That's I don't think that's what he was getting at. What he was getting at is don't. I think he summed it up the best way, which is your belief system. He called it your belief system, and he might have been aping that from somebody else, but BS. And he said never believe anybody else's BS too completely, but never believe your own BS too completely either. So always just be questioning where you got your ideas about things, because it is pretty crazy when you start interrogating yourself about why you believe what you believe or where you got that idea to think that this is that, or it totally shatters your view of where these things came from, because lots of times you pick up points of view from other people that you had no idea that was even something that you had picked up from somebody, and you've put no thought into it whatsoever. You just sort of adopted what somebody else said, somebody else's framework, somebody else's quote reality tunnel. So anyways, interesting stuff. I've been rambling for quite a while. Anyways, buddy, I'm going to cut it off. Hopefully you're doing well. Let's check in a little while. We'll catch up later. Anyways, buddy, thanks a lot. It was good chatting with you. We'll talk to you soon.